To remain updated with the latest business news, click on the bell icon.
So even as the Tatas get down to the task of reviving Air India, the key questions are, what can flyers expect from an airline run by the Tatas, who already have two other airlines, Air Vistara and Air Asia? For more on that, we're joined by Jitendra Bhargava, former Executive Director, Air India, and the author of the book, Descent of Air India. Welcome, Mr. Bhargava. Let me begin by asking you, what can passengers expect?
See, there are two aspects that passengers must focus on. One, those who were patronizing Air India, that they will have a more reliable airline, consistency in onboard services and ground handling. So there is a big gain for the existing passengers. And for those who have not been patronizing Air India, they will have another option. Many of the young people were not even looking Air India as an option simply because it was government owned. They had a certain perception of the airline, and this perception will change. So therefore, there is a lot for the passengers, thanks to this takeover of Air India by Tatas, because you have a reliable airline and a good quality airline, which will not only give a run for the money for the other Indian carriers, but also international carriers, the Gulf and the Southeast Asian carriers, which have hitherto been dominating the Indian skies.
Mr. Bhargava, do you think India will revisit some of the international bilaterals that we gave away as a country to Gulf Airlines and other carriers? Do you expect the policy to change?
You see, if you look up the last 7.5, 8 years of the Modi regime, they have been very, very constrained as far as the giving away of bilateral rights to foreign carriers is concerned. They've been wanting Indian carriers to make use of the bilateral rights which are not being used, rather than give them to the Gulf carriers or the Southeast Asian carriers. That's been the government policy for the last almost 8 years now. What unfortunately has happened is that Air India has remained the solitary Indian carrier to be flying to Europe, United States, Australia, Japan, etc. And none of the other carriers have even thought about it, barring Vistara in a limited way. So what will happen is that this vacuum that was created was being filled up by these Gulf carriers and the Southeast Asian carriers on the pretext that India did not have enough capacity for flying India originating passengers or people coming to India, the large Indian diaspora. So let us give them capacity, and they were being given, whether for a consideration for whatever other factors. But now once Tatas have acquired Air India, what will happen is it will no longer be a cash-starved airline. Tatas will ensure that it grows. And I expect that at least 20-25% growth is imminent under the Tatas, because you have a large Indian market in Europe and United States, which Indians wanted. And let's not forget, once Air India is with Tatas, there'll be a qualitative, quantitative improvement in the product quality. And once that is there and a perception that currently exists ceases to exist, a lot of people will patronize. And what is the ultimate gain? Is that Air India, an Indian carrier, will grow rather than Gulf carriers and Southeast Asian carriers, which have been dominating our skies, very unfortunately.
In terms of the product quality, what can we expect? Do you think Air India will reach at least the kind of service levels we see with Air Vistara, including for in-flight entertainment, for instance, or meal service?
You'll have to divide the product into two aspects. Certain aspects can be attended to in a matter of weeks, like the food, the wine on board, customer attention by the cabin crew, etc., can be done very fast. Because all that they require is to re-engineer the work practices of cabin crew on board, airport staff, etc. And once they've done it, they will deliver. Because what unfortunately happened is that a lot of cabin crew have been in the service industry for long, but did not have the enough motivation, I would say, coming in because of the various kinds of salary cuts and everything that was imposed on the staff, etc., by cash-starved Air India. So once you treat the staff properly and professionally, you will see them delivering. So this is what they can do it in the short run. But yes, as far as the quality of aircraft ambience is concerned, it will take time. And fortunately, we are in COVID times, but not full capacity is being deployed at the moment. So they will have a certain amount of aircraft, certain number of aircraft on ground, which can be taken up for servicing and improving the hardware on board the flights, including in-flight entertainment.
What does this landmark deal mean for the country?
You see, the unfortunate part is that people have been thinking that the disinvestment of Air India will only benefit Air India. They're overlooking the fact that once you have a very strong domestic carrier, international carrier from within India, there will be a better amount of competition with the other Indian players, with the other international players. And once you have an Indian carrier flying to all parts of the world, there is no reason why India originating traffic will not patronize Air India in preference to foreign carriers. The unfortunate part, as I said earlier, has been that Air India had a certain perception. People had a certain perception of Air India, which wasn't very flattering. And Air India also did not dispel that kind of perception. As I've often said, Air India was certainly not as good as it ought to have been, but was not as bad as it was made out to be. So once you have the long-haul product, for example, to the United States, you got Dreamliners flying non-stop to the European destinations. Likewise to Australia and Japan, there is no reason why Tata will not bring about a substantial change and it will become the number one choice. And fortunate part is that none of the Indian carriers fly, so there is no domestic competition for the new Air India under Tatas. So I look forward to Air India emerging as a major player on the international scenario, more on the international than on the domestic, because Indigo rules the domestic skies to the extent of 50-55%.
What do you expect the Tatas to do? They already have Air Vistara and Air Asia. Do you see them consolidating operations going forward?
You see, I'm certainly not privy to what Tata's thinking is, but I am conscious of this fact that having done due diligence, having taken a decision to bid for Air India, they would have certainly looked at these options as to what are we going to do, not with 3, but with 4 airlines. Air India Express as well, besides Air Asia and Vistara. So they will, probably the easier part is, in Air Asia, they have a commanding ownership. So they and Air India Express can certainly be merged faster. But Vistara is jointly owned with Singapore Airlines. And a strong Air India, that's my personal feeling, will also impact Singapore Airlines. Because currently Singapore Airlines takes a lot of Indian passengers from various cities in India over to the hub in Singapore and then flying them to United States. Now, when Air India becomes a carrier that can compete with Singapore Airlines in quality, and you already have quantitative kind of requirement, that number of the 5 destinations being served by Air India and United States, and more frequencies will be added, then there will be a threat to everybody, all the carriers of the Gulf and Southeast Asia who have hitherto enjoyed monopoly only because Air India was weak, did not mount enough capacity on these routes, even though the flights were going full. So when you look at these changes being brought about, and Tatas will drive the airline commercially, let's not overlook this fact. A professional leadership, a professional board, a professional management will contribute enormously to what we can foresee Air India as something that we will all be proud of and say, look, this is the new chapter in Air India's history. I have said on record that the years before 27th January 2022 were when we witnessed the descent of Air India. From 28th of January, we can look at the history and era of ascent for Air India.
Can we expect Singapore Airlines, which is already invested in Air Vistara, to perhaps become an investor in Air India as well? Singapore has multiple investments in India, including one of the largest mobile phone companies.
You see, my information is that prior to their bidding for Air India, Tatas had checked up with Singapore Airlines. And they had shown their reluctance for whatever reasons. But I'm sure that once 6 months or 1 year has gone by and Air India takes shape and comes out as a vastly improved product, probably Singapore Airlines may evince interest again.
What about existing Air India employees and their future?
You see, it's an ironical aspect that when you look at it, that on one side employs him blaming the government ownership for what Air India has currently become. And on the other side, they want that kind of a drawback to be retained only because they've been looking at the disinvestment of Air India from their personal perspective. I have stated in unequivocal terms that you got to look at from the Air India perspective. Air India will improve, which means that they will be assured of a job. Government has stipulated that Tatas will have to retain all employees for a period of 1 year. People can perceive it as a negative thing that, look, what happens to me after a period of 1 year? But I have been saying, take it up as a challenge. This is the period when you must deliver your very best. If Tatas want to re-engineer your work practices, please support. Don't try and resist like you have been doing in the past. The work practices will have to be re-engineered, made more productive, more efficient, considering the fact that they all have experience. That's one part. Second is pilots, aircraft maintenance engineers, cabin crew. They are the only three categories in which recruitment has been taking place for the last 10 years. For the other categories, it was banned more than 20 years ago. So these three professional categories that we are talking about, pilots, aircraft maintenance engineers, and cabin crew, will be needed by Tatas. You can't get them so easily. They are trained pilots. And the positive aspect, as I've been looking at, is, yes, current strength of pilots and aircraft maintenance engineers, cabin crew, may be 20% more than what they currently require. But it gives Tatas the cushion for expansion without incurring additional money. And the faster they expand these services, particularly to Europe and United States, the better it is for Air India, the better it for Tatas. And I'm not saying by any imagination that it will make Air India a profitable airline, but the losses will considerably go down once this expansion takes place. Productivity of employees goes up, both men and machines, I would say, the productivity goes up. And then you find a totally new Air India. And we'll all be saying, oh, well, Tatas have turned Air India around and it's become a good, great airline. We may not be able to compare it with the 70s and say this has got back to the regaining of the glorious years. But the fact is, it will be a product which is as good and of which we can all be proud of.
All right, Mr. Bhargava, thank you so much for joining us for a detailed look at the mega takeover and the implications going forward.
If you like the video, do like, comment, share and subscribe.